English players starting on the team. And so now the movement of players was much more free and much more globalized. And this has been a huge debate on how this impacts international team play. So what you also have is, and this is only really true, I guess, in soccer and maybe tennis and golf outside of Olympic sports in the United States. If you play for an NFL team, you don't play for the NFL American team to go beat the Chinese team 100-0, right? If you come from New Zealand and you play in the Premier League, you also represent New Zealand at international soccer, international football. So Winton Rufer, for example, played for Werder Bremen for many years in the German league. He won German League Player of the Year and then represented New Zealand, because that's where he was from, in the qualifying attempts for New Zealand to get into the World Cup, the pinnacle of international competition. So representing your country is the top echelon of European sports leagues. So it's an honor to play for the best team, but to play for your country is even bigger. So when Germany plays, all the Bayern Munich fans, all the Werder Bremen fans, all the Schalke, Dortmund fans, Schalke and Dortmund hate each other, but they all cheer together for Germany. It's as if we could take Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Alabama, put them together in one national team, and we're all going for the same team. It's pretty tough, but that's how it would work. Okay, so playing for your country is huge. Also, professional teams have to release their players, and they have designated periods where on those weeks there's no league competition. It's a week for international competition. So that's a difference, and there's a huge market in national team sales that you only began to see here really, I think, in this past World Cup. Broadcasting rights have become huge now and become almost as significant in European sports as they are in American sports. The European broadcasting rights for the Olympic Games are beginning to approach the American broadcasting rights. So if we think of Europe as one market of 600+ million people, you can see that its potential is long-term to become actually larger by a factor of 2 than the American sport market. So there's still tremendous room for growth in the European sports marketplace, which is why I will almost guarantee you, I will almost bet a team mascot, you guys probably wouldn't, that UGA thing, right? But almost bet a team mascot on the fact that Jacksonville Jaguars or NFL expansion team will be based in London, England within 5 years' time. Jacksonville already has a London office, and they're playing multiple games in London the next few seasons. And other NFL clubs are going to London and selling out Wembley Stadium, the traditional home of English soccer. Conversely, Manchester United and Real Madrid can go to University of Michigan Stadium and fill it to capacity for a preseason friendly match, just for the chance to see these guys play. Oftentimes not even all the best players on the field. 109,000 people. So there's tremendous global flow, which also means that television, new media rights go up, because the more that interest is created, the more you see people walking in with Manchester City shirts on who want to watch it. Indeed, many leagues in Asia and Africa have altered their playing schedules so that local teams don't play when Premier League matches from England are on television. In Nigeria and Thailand in particular, they found that attendances were going down at local leagues because everyone was going to watch Premier League on television. And I'll come back to that in a minute. This just gives you an idea of the rapid growth in television rights fees that are being paid. And this is particularly true in the big 5 leagues, which are moving ahead of other countries. Why do you think Germany, England, Spain, Italy, and France are way ahead of other national sports leagues in Europe? Any idea? Revenue, yes. Size of market.
And also, like, a lot of the countries like Bulgaria, they are like the best players
are going into other leagues. Stoichkov played for Barcelona for years, and in fact is 2 of the most popular all-time Barcelona players before this last sort of 5-6 years were a Bulgarian and a Dutch player. Gives you an idea. But they're much, much bigger. So a country like the Netherlands or Belgium or Bulgaria can't compete for the same kind of TV rights. Germany has less than some of the others globally because their internal market is so strong that they haven't had to focus as much. Yet Bayern Munich is so valuable because they were the first European team, club team, to start Asian tours. And so they started to build up an Asian fan base. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. Revenue distribution models, as I said, are different between the leagues, from outright revenue sharing to top clubs controlling the marketplace. And you have variations on the different kinds of models that exist in North American leagues. But competitive balance is now becoming a significant problem in European soccer. And I've got some stats for you in a minute. I'll come back to that. The value of the top clubs in shirt sponsorship, okay? If you look at, what's your name?
Matthew.
If you look at Matthew's shirt, Matthew has a Manchester City shirt on, but what is the largest thing you see on his shirt? Stand up for a second. He's off camera for the guys off site, but it says Etihad Airways, right? Etihad Airways can pay millions in sponsorship, although they're owned by the same people who own the club. But they could pay millions and millions in sponsorship for Manchester City, which is a major revenue stream. Indeed, Nike decided that Manchester United was demanding too much money. This is Nike, believe it or not. Too much money for their sponsorship. So Nike withdrew. Manchester United was asking in sponsorship rights for the next several years the value in excess of 99% of world soccer franchises, just for shirt sponsorship. So Manchester United's shirt sponsorship deal is worth more than the value of some Premier League clubs in total. So now you see that the disparity in funding is becoming extremely significant, to the point that shirt sponsorship becomes so valuable that a beer company in Thailand sponsored Everton before they even sold any beer in England. They had zero market in England, solely to get their beer brand in front of Thai consumers at Premier League matches in Thailand. Now, an onflow of that is they're now selling their beer in England. But when they took the shirt sponsorship, the strategy was to get that shirt sponsorship in front of consumers in Thailand. Carlsberg, a Danish beer company, sponsored Liverpool for several decades. Why? Because Liverpool was the best club when they started showing English soccer live in Scandinavia. And Carlsberg's beer sales in Scandinavia are tremendous. It also helped them up their beer sales as they were trying to move into the British market. And Carlsberg became almost synonymous with Liverpool for many decades. This has also meant that investment opportunity has been seen by international investors as being huge in the international soccer marketplace, particularly in Premier League football. And I published a paper a few years ago that talked about American move into ownership in the British marketplace. Aston Villa is owned by an American. Liverpool at the time was owned by an American. Arsenal's major shareholder is American. Chelsea is owned by a Russian. Several clubs in England and Paris Saint-Germain are owned by Middle Eastern investors. And there's a number of investors coming in from all around the world into major clubs, either as outright owners or significant shareholders in shareholding model clubs. Not surprising that the two clubs that were singled out when UEFA decided to get tough on how much clubs could spend on players were two clubs that had just been bought by Middle Eastern owners, Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain in Paris. I'll talk about that as well. So shirt sponsorship, also a huge issue for the top clubs. Clubs also have a tremendous amount of ability to leverage revenue from other sources. And this goes back to the 80s and 90s even. And some of the clubs that pioneered this have actually imploded financially at the end of the day, not because of these revenue streams, but because of irresponsible behavior and spending. But they set up where you could have your bank account, your credit card, you know all about these, like, I guess you can get a UGA credit card with a big G or a big bulldog on it or something like that, right? They started this years ago in the British market. Book your holiday, your vacation, which is a big deal over there because people get 6 weeks a year vacation. How many weeks do they normally get in the US? 2. Many European countries have 6 to 7 weeks vacation a year. In Germany, they have 6 weeks a year, and German workers on average are more productive than American workers. Maybe more vacation actually makes you more productive. Anyway, that's a debate. So going on holiday is a big deal, especially when you live in England where it rains all the time. And it rains sideways, especially in the north and in Scotland. So what do you want to do if you go on vacation? You want to go to Spain and Greece, where it's warm, and lie on the beach. And if you're English, get incredibly drunk lying on the beach, right? And where you get sunburned, and then you have to go inside, and then, anyway, crazy. But book your holiday through your club, book your mortgage through the club. Watch online streaming of matches. And they had online television channels early on. In fact, Manchester United was one of the pioneers in setting up its own television channel at a time when Rupert Murdoch, you probably heard of him, right? He owns Fox. He also owns Sky and many other media outlets around the world. He actually changed his citizenship from Australian to American so he could buy more in the US market when he was leveraging to buy Fox. Murdoch invests all around the world and decided that on top of owning the television rights and the print media, that he should own sports clubs outright. He tried to buy Manchester United. This was blocked by the Monopolies Commission in England, and he was not allowed to do it because he would control too much of the marketplace. So he was blocked there. He did buy the Dodgers, I think, in baseball for a while. And so there was this cross-investment of brands that was taking place. And if you look at the structure of companies that are invested in sports teams and entertainment activities, you will find that many sports franchises are just part of a much larger structure of brewing, investment in movies, sports, events, other activities. So it's a multifaceted marketplace, which is why we teach them in separate courses, but largely together in the UK, is that events, tourism, sport are very closely connected. And one of the things that's begun to happen quite early on in the British marketplace for sure was stadium tours, museums, where you could come and experience the past glories of your club or get a picture of yourself standing on the field, or as they call it, the pitch. So you could stand where your players stand, you could sit where the players sit and take pictures, and that you could make a lot of money off of this. Most new stadiums that are built now, like here, have conferencing facilities. We have a planning application in place in Brighton for the club to build a hotel and other entertainment around where the new stadium is. So that's much more on the lines of what you would expect to find in the American marketplace. Costs. As I said, a number of clubs pay more than 100% of earnings in player salaries, and player salaries is by far the biggest expense for clubs. The reason salaries continue to rise is the fact that the potential revenue sources are huge. And this is where I want to go back to the European-wide context. The best clubs each year get to play the following season in a European-wide competition. There are two of these. One is called the Champions League, which you may have heard of, and the other is called the Europa League. This is based on essentially every team's national champion, every country's national champion gets to try to qualify for the Champions League. Plus the countries that have high-performing teams in the past also can qualify if they finish high up in the league. So the top 4 English clubs, for example, qualify to play in the Champions League. And occasionally, if an English team also wins the Champions League and doesn't qualify itself, you could have as many as 5. And it scales down to the Scottish League has the top team gets to play, the Bulgarian League has only the top teams. Sometimes the second and third teams qualify to play in the Europa League. This also helps create a sense of disproportionate balance between the top leagues and other leagues. And if you look at the Champions League performances, the winners, the finalists, and even the semifinalists and quarterfinalists, the overwhelming majority of the teams come from England, Spain, and Germany. Italy follows next, and a couple of teams from France have made the quarterfinals. And then there's only a couple of clubs in the last decade or so from Portugal, Russia, etc., who've gotten as far as the quarterfinals. So it's very centralized among a core group of top clubs. That allows those clubs to bring in additional revenue on top of what they get in the domestic leagues. So much so that Manchester United last season would not even last a whole season with a new manager after Sir Alex Ferguson retired, because they were performing so poorly that they were going to miss the Champions League. So that's where it came to there. Competitive balance is almost non-existent, and let me come to the end because I see time's getting short, that this leads to potential for corruption. The betting industry on European soccer is enormous. It's worth billions of dollars virtually every week of the season. And you can bet on who's going to score the first goal, what the result is going to be, who's going to score the second goal, what the score will be at halftime. And this has led to a lot of abuse in the system, and indeed some tremendous corruption that has involved Interpol and international federations. So, there are a number of differences, but we can also see when we look at the business model that we can break down revenue streams, opportunities, internationalization. Stockport County, an English club that has never won anything, and usually plays in the 3rd or 4th league, quadrupled its sales by sponsoring a Chinese team in the Chinese league and bringing one of the players over to play in England. And they sold more club gear in China than they sold in England by 4 times in the first season. And so they know that the international market is hugely important. NFL's coming to London, the major cycle races. Giro d'Italia started in Northern Ireland this year, and the Tour de France started in York, England. And so there's this globalization of these major brands. What's happened then is you see this concentration at the top end of the marketplace. The question is, how does that filter down to other levels? And many clubs know this, and even some of their community work is built on the notion of creating spectators for the long term. So anyway, I'll stop there, and probably don't have time for questions if some of you have to leave, but if you have questions, you're free to ask them or catch me on the round the rest of the day. Thanks.
Dr. Nauright will be available at 3 o'clock in room 211. You're very welcome to come to join the discussion session. If you need, also, even though I did not check with Dr. Nauright, assume the slides available.
Yeah, fine.
If any of you want to get a copy of the slides, contact me or Brian, and we'll send a copy of the slides to you.